Well, the coronavirus continues to spread around the world, but the UK is having great success in fighting back. The number of confirmed cases of COVID-19 falling far below those of its European counterparts. Containment due in large part to UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson's reliance on scientific advisors and his implementation of a lockdown, but also the ability of the British people to come together in a time of crisis. Prime Minister Johnson taking a moment to comment on the overwhelming support of the British people.
I also want to offer a special thank you to everyone who has now volunteered to help the NHS. When we launched the appeal last night, we hoped to get 250,000 volunteers over a few days. But I can tell you that in just 24 hours, 405,000 people have responded to the call.
With a bit of insight on the UK and Prime Minister Johnson's response to the pandemic, we're joined by Nile Gardiner, a former advisor to Lady Thatcher and director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Nile, always good to see you. What do you think? I mean, we go to you because you're reasonable, you're rational, and you're fair. How do you think Boris Johnson is performing in this pandemic in the UK?
You know, I think Boris Johnson's leadership has been very strong so far. He's a very charismatic leader. He's somebody who I think is very well suited for dealing with a crisis. He had a very successful few months delivering Brexit, which was delivered on January the 31st. He's somebody who I think has a very good understanding of the importance of leading at key moments in British history. And I think he's the right man for the job in terms of responding to the coronavirus issue. And it's significant that an opinion poll was just released a couple of days ago, which showed that Boris Johnson's popularity is actually soaring among the British people. He now has a popularity approval rating of 55%. He's up about 20 percentage points or so. And I think the British people really have a lot of confidence in the way that he's handling this crisis. And it's important to bear in mind as well, I think that the UK is doing significantly better at this stage than countries such as Italy, Spain and France. I think the UK is doing well overall. And I think Boris Johnson certainly is the right man to be leading Britain at this time.
Yeah, the media tends to challenge him a bit. I want to play you this soundbite and get your reaction on the other side.
How did we come to be so woefully behind other countries that have checked, evaluated and deployed tests in much, much bigger numbers already?
We are massively ramping up our testing programs, buying in huge numbers of tests to see whether you've had it already, but also pushing forward very fast on testing people to see whether they currently have it.
Are those types of questions, Niall, are they emblematic of what you're seeing over in the UK toward Boris Johnson, or does it seem to be pretty fair coverage overall?
Well, I think certainly the Prime Minister is getting a lot of fire from members of the media and so on. And I think that certainly, the Prime Minister can expect a lot of that. But I think the reality is that the British government certainly has shown very strong leadership with regard to the coronavirus. I think with regard to levels of testing, you are going to see large numbers of British citizens being tested in the coming weeks. I think the UK certainly wants to follow the lead of countries such as South Korea, for example, who have implemented very intensive testing programs. And I think the British government certainly is doing everything it possibly can at this time to prepare the British people for what will be a very difficult few weeks. Yeah. But certainly, as is always the case here, I think a Prime Minister is going to come under heavy fire from the media, no matter what he does. But I do think that Britain is very well prepared in terms of dealing with this crisis. And I think also the British people are an extremely resilient people. They will rise to the challenge. And I think the coronavirus crisis certainly is uniting the British people together in terms of confronting what is potentially the biggest challenge since World War II.
Yeah, well, I've noticed over in this country, Niall, that what's happening is we have this very bold and robust private-public partnership, and that's kind of working out well. Are you seeing the same thing in the British government? Are they reaching out to private industry, and is that working if that's the case?
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. So the British government has appealed to key captains of industry to move forward with the production of ventilators, for example, key equipment that is needed in order to provide the kind of medical care that is required for dealing with the large-scale pandemic. And you are seeing companies such as Dyson, for example, stepping forward actually to work very closely with the government in terms of mass production of medical equipment. In the same way, of course, British companies stepped forward during World War II to do all it possibly could to help the war effort. I think today also you are seeing many British companies stepping forward, working very closely with the government to provide absolutely what is necessary in order to confront what is a large-scale pandemic.
Yeah, you talked about this. In fact, we talked about this, the open borders case. This has got to be a hot topic over there now with British, the UK faring so much better than Europe at large. And clearly going forward, you had talked about this, the open borders debate is about to get a lot more robust in the months ahead.
It certainly is, actually. And it is very significant that Great Britain has not been part of the Schengen Agreement, basically an open borders agreement among 26 European countries. The UK has always remained outside of that agreement. It's had far better control of its borders than most European countries have. And I think the open borders approach that you've seen in continental Europe, in countries such as Italy, Spain, France, for example, it has been absolutely disastrous in terms of the spread of this virus. And you've now seen many European countries reimposing border controls. And I think the old sort of idea of open borders championed by leaders such as Emmanuel Macron, that is now collapsing, I think. And European countries are reasserting border controls. And also the European Union as a whole now is barring entry into the EU from outside of the European Union. So I think the old open borders mentality is being largely thrown out of the window.
All right, fascinating. Nile Gardiner, thank you so much. Good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you very much.